Welcome back, everyone, to another Drum Dog podcast. Today, joined by very special guest, Honorary Drum Dog. I guess we can. I think we've given you that title in the past, Rob. Rob
Hey,
Bryan.
nice.
Thank you so much for being here, Rob.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for asking me. Always a pleasure. And yes, being a bastion of Drum Dog is an ambassador is always a very good thing. Very proud to be.
And we're honoured that you would accept such a title. Ambassador is a good word. We can have a bunch of different titles for you. For for the viewers and listeners that don't know what we're getting at, Rob, we've had the pleasure of working with Rob a bunch of times through Drum Dog. How many masterclasses have you done for us now? Two, three?
Three, and one live drum clinic with Steve. No, two live drum clinics. One on
Yeah.
my own at the Swan Theatre in the Oval, and then one with Steve at the very same location. So yeah.
There you go. And I mean, there's one more coming up which we can come to. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I mean, we don't have a physical leaderboard of, how many times we've collaborated with drummers. But if we did, I think you'd be up there.
I think so, and I did a lesson pack as well. I forgot that. Maybe two lesson
Oh,
packs
there we go.
as well, man. I've got to be clearly in the lead. Come on.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think anyone's coming for your crown.
Well, not
Just
yet.
yet. But no, thanks again, Rob, for coming on. It's been great working with you in the studio now to have a chat. And the reason I wanted to have an interview with you is because every time we've chatted in the studio, or I've been going through and clipping the content that you've made, and I didn't actually clarify, did I? So the two of the masterclasses you've done for us, you have this segment under the influence, it's called, and your first one was under the influence of Buddy Rich.
Yeah.
And listeners, viewers, you can find this on our website, Drum Dog website. Rob basically takes a look at Buddy Rich's style, his technique, and he breaks it down different bits. Very interesting. You've done a Buddy Rich one, you've done an Ian Pace one, and one that's coming out is a Tony Williams one.
Yeah.
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 And the rich knowledge you have for these drummers and music and drum history is golden. When I'm cutting up all the videos and I'm making shorts and verticals, a lot of your discussions on Ian Pace or Buddy Rich, they pop off on Instagram and on TikTok. So there's clearly an appetite for that, and I wanted to get you in and just talk about all that good stuff.
Great. Oh, a pleasure. Let's do it. I love it.
Let's do it. I first wanted to give some context, I guess, for people that don't have the pleasure of knowing who you are. It would be really great if you could give us an overview of your career, because you're a professional drummer now. I won't. I'll let you tell the story because it would be better coming from you. But it would be great to know how you started off your journey and where you're at now.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. So I basically started when I was 9 years old. I was exposed to music from both of my parents. My mum was just a massive music fan. She didn't play anything or sing, though she still likes to sing, but it's not always in tune, Mum. Love you. Yeah, so she was always had the radio on in the kitchen and the radio on in the car. And she loved Elvis, the Beatles, any commercial sort of music, the Carpenters, of the 60s and 70s, I'm talking, and the Beach Boys. Whereas Dad was a drummer. He played drums locally in the Bath, Bristol area. He was one of the cats, as they say, that if somebody like Ronnie Scott or Tubby Hayes was travelling down to perform in Bath or Bristol or the surrounding area, my dad was on the sort of 5 or 6 list of drummers that people would want to call. He wasn't a great technician. He didn't like soloing, but he could swing really well, and he had chops. He did have chops, but he liked to sort of keep time and just groove. And a lot of the soloists prefer that. They don't always, especially in the jazz world, you don't want a drummer trying to be Buddy Rich behind everything that you're doing in a jazz quartet. So Dad got a lot of gigs that way. And I was exposed to music that way. So he'd be playing like Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock and anything from Barry White, Average White Band, Weather Report. As I tell this story that I could be in my hallway in my family home in Corsham, where we used to live, on a Sunday morning, and both doors would be shut to the living room and the kitchen. But Mum would be doing the roast, listening to, whatever she was listening to, pop stuff. So I could open that door and have Elton John coming through, whatever. Open this door, and it could be anything from the bands I've just mentioned. So it was like, I didn't realize, but I was getting a rich kind of education in the perfect 2-3 minute pop song and that structure of music, and also Dad's longer kind of more muso listening, where it's about the soloist and developing the tune and, not about a quick sell. So I kind of loved both of it. And then, of course, I found Top of the Pops. So I'm sat there from 7 years old watching all these great bands, Blondie and Boomtown Rats and Siouxsie and the Banshees and all these things happening and just soaking it all in. And then one night, a guy called Gary Newman came on. He was number one with Our Friends Electric, and I'd never seen or heard anything like it. So I tried, went to Woolworths and I bought a little keyboard, tried that, and I didn't know what I was doing. Then I bought a guitar, didn't know what I was doing. And then Dad decided to retire his drum kit, and he sold it. And because he said, "Son, would you ever play drums?" I said, no, it's all about the keyboards and guitar, Dad, going to be a rock star. And then literally 2.5 months later, or 3 months later, I find in the garage a pair of drumsticks that he kept and a Louis Belsom drum method book. And one Saturday afternoon, I flipped through it and I picked up the sticks and I tried to copy the pictures. Anyway, he come home and I said, "Dad, do you know what?" He said, "Don't you tell me you want to play the drums. I've just sold that bloody kit." And I was like, "Yeah, I do." So he said, "Right. So I'm going to get you a practice pad and a bass drum pedal, and you sit down and you read the music and you just practice with your right foot on the pedal and your hands on a pad. And you're doing that for 6 months. If you can prove you can do this," very old school. This is, 1979. Dad was kind of taught 20 years before that way by a kind of sergeant major type thing. And I did, and that was it. And I flourished. And then Dad would bring back all these different, Carmina Pieces reggae book and realistic rock and how to read drum charts. And he used to bring all this stuff home, plus give me, though he didn't like to, but let me listen to all his records. But I'd scratch them anyway. But I'd listen to that, and then I'd buy my own records. And then in 1980, John Lennon was shot. And I remember going into school the next day and all the teachers were crying and we were like, "What's going on? What's happened?" And then when I got home that night, all of BBC One was dedicated to Beatles stuff. And all of a sudden I was like, the Beatles, who are these people? I thought they were like the Monkees because I'd seen the Monkees on TV. And my parents were like, no, the Monkees copied the Beatles. This is Anyway, so then it was the Beatles and I loved Ringo. And then I found Buddy Rich and Art Blakey and it just grew. And I did some stuff at school, joined a few bands, joined the Wim Band. And then I leave school and I start working in Bath at a drum shop, and you couldn't be in a better place. So I work at this drum shop, which eventually does the wholesale for Sonor drums. And I start gigging locally in goth bands. And I was in a goth band plus an REM style band, which are completely different. Plus my dad had got me in with his jazzers. So straight down there, I was also at a jazz gig, doing jazz gigs. And people would say, "Did I see you with a jazz band the other day in the Bell?" And hang on, then they go to Mole's Club and they'd say, "Listen, did I see you?" And it was, I just couldn't stop. And it was because the eclectic listening of my parents made me think that I wanted to play everything, and I enjoyed everything. There was things I was better at than others. And then from there, of course, people say, "Who's this young kid on the scene?" And you give people your phone number and business cards, as it was, and it just grew and it grew. And my first professional gig was with Hugh Cornwell. He left the Stranglers in 1991. And I was in an REM band, style band, alternative indie rock as it was then, called The Deep Six. We became his backing band. We also played on one of his first solo albums. And then after that split up after a little while, but I did MTV with that and did a lot of experience, got a lot of exposure. And then Kid Krog and the Coconuts had split up. And then Koti Mundi, the percussionist, was looking for a drummer. Hugh knew him. So I got that gig, and then that, do you see what I mean? And then I ended up playing with Modern English because those guys knew Koti Mundi, and it just kind of went on and on. And I got into the session scene in Bath and Bristol, and just doing the right things, turning up, doing the right thing, making sure you have the right gear, people's songs, you're respectful to the music, you're there on time, all the obvious stuff. And it just kept growing, and it ended up with me joining Siouxsie, from Siouxsie and the Banshees, so I spoke about earlier, seeing her on TV, and then all of a sudden I'm playing with her in 2006. It was incredible. And all along that line, there were other sessions coming in and stuff. And from Siouxsie, I worked with Simple Minds. And then from Simple Minds, I went to Lorena McKinnett. And it's just been this thing where I'm constantly moving around. And I won, these Grammy certificates by working with an Italian singer called Laura Pausini, just off the back of those two things. And, Dan, I can't tell you, if you do a bad job, people know about it. If you do a good job, even more people know about it. And then I'm getting calls from all over the place. And I did drum clinics probably when I was with Sonor back in the early 90s or mid 90s. So I started doing drum clinics, and the educational side was coming up alongside the professional side. And I've always enjoyed that, and I've done some articles for Modern Drummer and also Rhythm Magazine. And I didn't realize, you said about this thing about knowing all about the history of a lot of different things. I just was always, a nerd. I just enjoyed finding out. I'd sit and talk to Dad about these drummers, and I'd talk to my granddad about, how did you feel, Granddad, when the Beatles arrived, and you were already older and you thought they were a threat to your kids. And, what was that actually like? Because I'd grown through the punk thing and they thought that was scary. And then you see these 4 mop tops and you think, why was that scary? But you forget the social differences. So all of that, I look into that as well. I just find it fascinating, and it never stops. It's endless. I was watching Vinny this morning on some podcast, and he was saying a similar thing. I thought, oh God, I'm glad it's not just me. Some people are really into the history of the instrument and not just always the playing, but finding out the social things that were happening, why certain people played the way they did. So and that takes me to where I am now. So I'm a DW endorser, still doing loads of clinics and stuff, educational stuff with people like yourself. I'm still touring the world with Siouxsie. We're hopefully going to have some more projects on the go with that, and Lorena. And I've just started work on my solo album, which we can talk about at a later date, maybe later today. I don't know. But that's kind of as brief as I can. There's been a lot of other things I probably missed, but that's kind of as quick as I can get it in 8-10 minutes to get it to where we are now.
That was perfect. That was wonderful. Thank you. And a lot of things for me to pick out. I'm going to start with, did you say 2006 was when the Siouxsie gig kind of came up for you? It was around then?
It did, yeah. They recorded the album there, and I think I started the rehearsals 2007.
2007. Yeah. Okay, so how did that come about? Was it the same as, because you've and it's funny, it seems to be, as you put it really well, if you play badly, a lot of people know about it. If you play well, even more people know about it. And it's just about who you know, and like you put a shift in, you do your best, and then someone that brings you to another gig and you do well there. And was it just that? Was it just a network of people?
It was. And as I say, people say to me when I meet people at parties, I say, oh, there's a lot of luck involved. And I go, listen, there is. You're not going to rile me by that. There is some luck. But I always tell all my students this, and anyone that asks me when I'm mentoring and doing various things, I say, listen, the thing is, you can rely on luck only so far. Luck gets you into the rehearsal room or the audition room, whatever. What you do after that isn't luck.
Yeah.
If you suck and you haven't learned the material and you know it and you've been cracking the gags, it's all been great in the green room or whatever, and then it's like, oh, this guy's going to be great, or this person's going to be great when they play, and you sit down and darn well you're not ready, or you haven't done as much work. Only you can be to blame for that. Yeah. And that is the worst feeling, when you sit yourself down on that drum stool and you go, I'm not ready. Luck won't save you. So luck's important, but you have to keep working. And that's what I was going to say, re your question. All through that time, I kept working. I kept listening. I kept buying CDs as it was then, but obviously I've still got loads of records everywhere. But I just listened, went to see drummers, bought the DCI drum videos back in the day. I just studied, and I bought loads of books, got loads of books in the cupboard there. Every time I move, it's a nightmare. But just read and study. And now the YouTube arrived and it made things a bit easier, but you still have to put the hours in. So, luck is one thing. Rob's great. Do this. Yeah, get Rob. He'll be great. That's another thing. But the minute you get in that room, if you're not firing on all of your cylinders, as much as you can be, no one's ever completely prepared. There's always going to be a curveball. But if you make that target, Ian Pace said this, I think, if you make your target as small as possible, as you possibly can, that you could be in control of, you're always going to get someone that says something like, hey, did you learn the other track we sent you? And you go, I didn't get sent one. And they go, ha, got you. Or they'll say, yeah, we did. Did you not get it? Oh, well, let's just have a go at it. It's this, or something to psych you. There's always something, for a bit of fun that people will do. Or if someone says, let's just jam, then you can do your thing and just relax, But you've got to be ready for that as well. And as I say, if you're not, man, there's going to be somebody that they're going to be bring into the gig. And it's not always the most technical of drummers. It's just anyone that plays their music and understands them and does it well. I think that's what a lot of younger drummers don't understand. Just turning up and being Siouxsie is not going to get you the gig necessarily all of the time, but I know that's a whole other thing to talk about. But I think that's important information for people to know. Play the music.
For sure. And I think because I mean my background is in filmmaking, and I studied that at uni, and when in the kind of process of getting actors and crew members on board, I quickly learned that it's not, if you have 50 actors come in, you don't necessarily grab the best actor. You grab the actor that's right for the project. And I think the same applies for the drummer. You could have Buddy Rich comes in to audition for a certain kind of gig, a certain kind of band. Technically, he may be the best, but he's probably not the right one,
Totally.
And I guess that's something to bear in mind for aspiring drummers or people that get down about auditions. I was going to ask you, how did it feel, listening to Siouxsie when you were younger, and then all of a sudden you find yourself like playing in the same room and you're part of that project?
Scary, because even when I was seeing those Siouxsie and the Banshees videos, and if she was in the studio at Top of the Pops, I was always scared by the way she looked. She was intimidating. She wanted to be, I think. She was a strong woman, girl power before girl power was a thing, in a very male-orientated world, especially then. And knowing that Budgie, I didn't know his name was Budgie then, but, playing those big drum fills and stuff, I was aware that it was very tribal, punk. The guitar was important, of course, and the bass, of course, everyone's important in the band. And, of course, Siouxsie. But, I didn't really figure that until people sent me the MP3s. I basically got sent a hard drive of everything, all of the Banshees material, B-sides, rarities.
Yeah.
And they were like, that's yours. And I was like, what do I learn? And they were like, we're still working through it. We'll let you know. But these are the 10 that you're going to have to do, the big singles. And then there's going to be these rarities and sort of deep dark cuts, whatever they call them, deep cuts. And then I was aware after that, and I wrote everything out, obviously. I wanted it to be exactly right, watched all the YouTube clips of Budgie playing and think, right, hey, okay. And I made all of these notes because I was aware the next step was the legacy. How do you step in to anyone's shoes? I had it with Mel Gaynor, even though I just did those Simple Minds sessions for a couple of months. But the sort of hatred that you get from fans and stuff is ridiculous. It's crazy. But hate's a strong word. But the sort of silly little one-liners people put on YouTube and stuff, and they're meant to be hurtful. People say, "Oh, they're just sounding off." It's like, no, you don't write that. I'm a human being. I know when I'm being horrible and I know when I'm being nice. So I was really aware that I had, as they say, big shoes to fill or whatever, and I did. But I think I did it respectfully. And again, my target was smaller. I didn't put fills where there weren't fills. I didn't try and be complicated for the sake of it. I played what Budgie played. Occasionally, Sue would turn around and say, "Listen, can you give me a da 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 there or something?" It's not on the record because it's a studio thing, but live, he used to play something, or da 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 bosh, something just to send this bit into the chorus, just something different.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, okay, but I'll sooner be told that than the singer turning around constantly saying, "Can you not do? Have you heard the record?" That's not what he played. Yeah. Why are you putting something in that isn't there? And because it's so Tom oriented, there's so many things I could do, like a little flam onto the bass drum, little triplety things you could chuck in to say, "Ooh, look at me." Yeah. But it wouldn't have the people dancing, pogoing, and they wouldn't have the vibe. And again, as we just said, play the song. It's not respectful. Yeah. So it was stressful. And the first day she came in, we were told she was going to be. We were at Real World, Peter Gabriel's place, rehearsing. We were told she's going to come in. She might not stay, but she'll come in and she'll say hello. Mm-hmm. So we were halfway through a song. Of course, like any band, you learn the mechanics of the song, then you learn everything without the vocalist. So if anything goes wrong, you know exactly where you are in the arrangement. Then the vocalist comes in last and we all know where we are. Otherwise, you're just thinking, oh, I'll wait for this fill. She says something, doesn't she? Then I'll do this. That's no way to run a band. So the MD had us down and she came in. And I just remember my heart was just like, oh, my God. And she had big shades on and she just walked in and she looked like $1 million, man. She looked great. Yeah. And complete charisma. She just walked in, and it's just like, my God, you hear this about certain artists, you go, yeah, whatever. But people have got it. Some people have got that wow factor.
Yeah.
And we finished the song. She came around, shook everyone's hand, said hi, hi, hi. And she said, this sounds great. I'm going to stick around for one more song, then I'll disappear to the hotel. But sounding lovely. I'll be in tomorrow. And that was that. And she went, and everyone was like, whew. We did it, all hugged each other, like, yeah. Because it sounded, bad in a good way. It sounded great. The band were on it, and we had, I was firing off the sequences and stuff and loops and triggers. My setup was crazy. But it was awesome. But what's that in that Spider-Man film? They say, with great
power
comes whatever it is, it comes responsibility. That thing. That's amazing. I need to learn that. And I know it's a bit cheesy, but it's true. And when you take on a legacy gig like that, you've got to step up and honor it. And I'm Rob Bryan, but I am Budgie, respecting Budgie, and I'd love to meet him one day. Hopefully, he'd be okay with what I'm doing. I've never tried to say anything else. I've always been highly respectful, so I'd love to think we could get on and have a beer one day. That'd be a laugh. And just play the music. That's what I wanted to do. It's Rob Bryan, but I'm honouring this catalogue of fine music that we've been all over the world and people just love. And we've had a few comments as a band. Actually, I've not had too many, a few, but it's been really good. And now, because we've been with us so long, they now just take us under their wings. The fans love us, en masse. So we did it.
And that's been nearly 20 years that you've had this gig going.
Yeah. And, I often wonder when we regroup, is it like, am I going to get the call? Is it going to be okay? Yeah. And I don't know why we all do that. One day maybe she'll want to change up, but we're like a family. We get on really well. Yeah. And I just love the material. I feel like, as I say, it's never mine. It's never going to be mine. It doesn't belong to me. But I feel like I've put my mark on it for the fans in a live scenario. They're always going to prefer the Banshee versions. I know that. We all know that. But they've also said, but you guys doing it live now is pretty good for us, and we're happy with that. So thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah. Which is honestly, I guess, one of the best things you can hope. I mean, apart from people saying that it's even better than the Banshees era, but a bit like what we were saying earlier about the difference between being the best person and the right person. Yeah. Your kind of self-awareness of not necessarily like you're respectfully continuing the sound that Budgie had made with the original recordings. Yes. But it's still you on stage, and it's still, I guess, these very, even if you're playing every note exactly the way Budgie played it, there'll still be that element of Rob Bryan there, which is, I think, good though. That should be the way it is.
Yes. Yeah, I think that you've hit the nail on the head, Dan, actually, because like you say, you could play everything note for note. And when people study at Berkeley and these other great seats of learning, they learn all these great solos and they play them off and everything. And it's part of the course, and you have to do that, and you have to transcribe, which is great. But as another thing, it's like, well, you're never going to sound like that person. So you've done that solo and you've worked it out, but don't get lost that you think you are that person, Yeah. But you've brought your own feel to it. That's the good thing. You're never going to maybe play as fast or with the same finesse because you're a different human being. So, people have said, we love the way these big songs sound now, the big singles, but they've just got a slightly different feel, but that's okay. It's not like we play Happy House as a swing now or anything, They still got the drive. But like you say, it's the fact that the 4-core band, or it was 7 at one point, it was quite big, we all come with the song in mind. We know the mechanics of it. We know the structure, but it's the feel of us. And instead of Severin, Budgie, and John Mackay, or whoever the guitarist was at the time, or Robert Smith, we bring something different to it. So they get a new flavor. So it's Happy House, Spellbound, all the hits, but with a new kind of lease of life. Yeah. With different people playing it. Yeah. With still the same structure. They're going to start the same, they're going to end the same. We're not going to add any extra bits in 7/4. It's all as it is. And I think that's the beauty of it. And we've also brought songs to life because obviously the Banshees were great, but there was no, you play reel to reel in the background as some sort of backing, but there was no sequencers as such. They had that later. But of course, with all the technology we've got now with Ableton, the sound of the band, that's why we've stripped it down to just a 4-piece. We've had to lose a few members, unfortunately, but we can come out as just a 4-piece, or a 5-piece, and it's just rocking. because we've got all that behind. So people say we get all these songs that we, with the power of the punk thing, but then the stuff they couldn't use before, we've got it now, you know.
Yeah.
So you've transformed it. So that whole thing changes the shape. So that's another reason why I think the fans love it, because it's now being upgraded a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's such.
So it seems like it's different, you know.
That's such a good point, because, and I think this applies to both what we were saying about you, the individual, the drummer, being different to the original person that wrote and recorded the drum parts. But
Yeah.
you know, the world has changed, music technology has changed, and so that adaptation and evolution of sound is inevitable. So it comes down to how do you preserve that original kind of essence, but there's these extra textures and flavors that come with, you know, 2025 and Ableton and all the rest.
Totally. And I think it makes the band sound better. You know,
I was one thing. It was. I don't know if this was intentional. It was quite nice how when you were talking about when you were younger and you were telling your dad, no, you know, I want to be a rock star. I want to play the guitar. I want to play the keys. But now you're touring the world, and you've fulfilled that dream. I wanted to ask what's the best gig you've played, or what's the gig that you've played that's kind of left you being like, wow, like this is it.
Oh my God, that's like a bombshell question. Well, I guess very quickly, straight off the bat, you can't really see it here, but there's a canvas above my head of a picture that I took on a drum riser with Siouxsie, with the band. 2 years ago, we did a headline tour of the world, basically, or most of it. We still got some more to do, actually. But Siouxsie said, I'm only going out if I play festivals, and I headline them all. So, right, okay. So off we went, you know. And the biggest one we had was in Pasadena, something like 50,000 people. That's the biggest crowd I've ever played to. And we were there on the Saturday for our performance, and some of my heroes were playing before us. Gary Newman was on before us, and I met him that night for the first time. That's a whole nother thing. Iggy Pop was on just before us, and it was just a whole day, you know. It was called the Cruel World Festival, so it's all kind of 80s goth and rock bands, you know, all that. Billy Idol was on and all that stuff. Great, Modern English, all those people. And during Iggy's set, and it's open air, and all of a sudden we see some fork lightning in the distance, you know. We're thinking, that'd be all right, you know, like, we'll rock on, doesn't really matter. Not really thinking. And we're all psyched up, you know, this is the biggest gig of the whole sort of tour. This is the biggest festival we're going to do. And then it gets pulled 10 minutes before we go on stage. And the fans are going nuts because they haven't seen us since, I don't know, the last time we were in America, 2008, maybe. And and they're sort of on about getting the home guard in, and the helicopters going around, and it's like ABC are reporting it, and apparently my friends were seeing it on the news. It was like a thing that's been cancelled, and so we're backstage, and there was tears, and you know, because we're all ready to go. And anyway, so we stay on site because there's no way we can get out anyway, because 50,000 people are now panicking because of the lightning, and they're telling to get the hell out. It was carnage. It was horrific. And about 3 a.m, we're still there, and a bit tipsy by then, and the organizer come back and said, listen, we're going to do it again tomorrow night. Now, we were supposed to be flying home, but they rearranged the hotels, rearranged flights, give us a bit more money. And Iggy Pop was already back in New York. He'd flown back. He came back with his band. He said, I'll do it again. Gary Newman was staying on site anyway because he was going to leave on the Sunday. So he was on his tour bus. He said, I'll play again. So it was just Gary Newman, Iggy Pop, and then us. And most people came back. Even more people came back because they couldn't do the Saturday. All this, I couldn't make the Saturday. I had a thing. So, anyway, we came out and we did the gig, and it was so emotional because the fact it was cancelled, and then we were on again. They let us play for longer because it was only 3 bands, so we could do our normal 2-hour set or something, plus encores. And it was phenomenal. And at the side of the stage, you have Iggy Pop watching, I can't remember his name now, but it was the lead singer from, not the Foo Fighters, what's the other band?
Queens of the Stone Age?
Yeah, he was there. Josh, he was there. Is it Sherilyn Manson? What's her name? From Garbage, she was there. loads of different people were watching at the side of the stage. Gary Newman was there. And it was just like one of those times you've got to pinch yourself, you know, and you look out, and I'm on that drum rise, and I took this picture at the end of Sioux stood there with her arms out like this, which ended up in all the papers. And stupidly, I didn't get any. Yeah, I know. I gave it away, which was, yeah, anyway, that's a whole nother story. That's another learning curve. But it ended up in all the papers and stuff. But the manager saw it and said, that is the shot of the festival. That is the shot. And anyway, and by then he'd already had it. So anyway, so that was just emotional. And it's like a little kid in Corsham playing in the garage along to Gary Newman records. And then that night I've met Gary Newman, had a good chat with him and a good laugh with him. And I'm on the stage and I'm playing to these people, and I'm stood up and I'm saying thank you to these people, and that almost, you know, welling up, you know, it was kind of like, these are the moments that you kind of live for. And bizarrely, I'd ripped my trousers before I went on stage. So there was another story. Yeah. So that made it equally fun. So I'm stood up waving, thinking, right, all these people could probably see this massive rip in my trousers. So my tip would be, Dan, is if you get tailored trousers, which I had, don't do star jumps and squats just before you go on stage. That's what I did stupidly. And it was such a leveler. And it was like... And I said to my tech, well, he was behind the kit. I said to, Kathy, it was one of our crew, and I said, "Can you just see if I've ripped these trousers?" and he had the Meg light or whatever, and he went, "Yeah, they're Dennis the Menace. They're sort of striped." I was like, "Oh
no."
Anyway.
So what? You were trying to like psych yourself up with star jumps?
Yeah, he was like, "Whoo, whoo," and we had the group hug and all that, and I'm back to squats, and then he's like,
"Oh man."
And I said to him, have I got time to go back to the trailer? Because it was a buggy ride. You know, he said, no, nah, sorry. You're going to have to go out and play with ripped trousers to me.
But I mean, anyway. no one noticed, right? No one.
Well, apart from the fact that I love telling the story, but it was just such a leveler. Nobody knew. I'm sat on a drum store. It's not like I'm a guitarist walking about. But, you know, first song in, I'm sort of giggling to myself. One, we're doing it. The elation of this. This is amazing. They're going nuts for her. I'm playing, and I've got these people at the side of the stage, and my trousers are ripped. This is so Rob Ryan, you know?
Incredible.
It's just so funny. It was a very lovely night. It was gorgeous. So incredible. I think there's others for various reasons. Parents coming, obviously, lovely things like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's sort of a real career highlight. That one.
Yeah, I mean, understandably, given how many. I mean, the drama of all of it, where you're going from this huge, the biggest. Festival of the tour cancelled, pulled, to all of a sudden we're going to do it, and we're going to do it even bigger than the day before, and it sounds like a kind of fairy tale.
It was, and the fact that people were up in England, I don't know what the time, well, I know what the time difference is, but I don't know what time it would have been, but people messaging saying, "Are you guys okay? God, we've seen what's, you know, the gig's been cancelled, you know."
Yeah.
It's come up on my phone.
Yeah.
You know, we're getting aerial shots of the helicopter shining a beam. It was all like, blimey. But I tell you what, I don't like crowds anyway. I like seeing people at smaller venues, arenas, and maybe not stadiums. But, you know, the fact that there's only so many security and so many people were getting ugly and coming forward, you know, there was a real risk that it was going to get stormed, or whatever you would say. You know, they were going to crash down those very flimsy gate things they put up, you know, those fences. And they were bottling the stage. And now I'm not having to go at the fans, by the way, when I say this. You know, they were very upset. They'd been there all day. They were dying to see her. But just the situation of things getting out of hand very, very quickly, the fear of that was kind of scary as well. It's like those things when you see, you know, McCartney or someone talking about Beatle days, and we go, yeah. He goes, but I want to tell you what it was like. You get in a car, and then people are on top, and the roof of the car is caving in, and you're like this, and you can't get out, and you suddenly think, oh, that's not so much fun after all. No. You know, it's all these screaming girls. That must have been great. And it's like, no, it's horrific, pulling at you, ripping at you, and anyway. So and I had this sort of thought of all these people. What would we do? We'd just lock our Winnebagos, and what do you do then? Anyway, we didn't get there, but it was crazy. Like, whoa.
I can imagine. I mean, especially in those kinds of moments, like when you're in that moment and you've got the helicopters flying around and there's a lightning storm and there's 50,000 angry people, you don't know which way it will go. I mean, now with hindsight we know all is well, but in that moment you have no idea.
So it was kind of get ready to lock yourselves in,
get
the champagne out and just keep your head down. Yeah, so that was amazing. Lovely gig.
You mentioned Gary Newman, Iggy Pop,
Oh yeah,
a bunch of pretty big names. Is there
yeah.
one kind of encounter that you've had in particular where you're most starstruck, where you're like, I can't believe I'm meeting this person right now?
Um, yeah, there's a very quick. I'll go through a few.
Sure.
I met and anyone who knows me knows I'm going to tell this story. And I can't think. Kiefer Sutherland.
Okay.
He was on. We played one of the festivals in England. I can't think which one it is now. God, my memory. Anyway, we were headlining that one, and he was on 2 or 3 bands before us, and he stuck around at the end of the gig, and he was drinking whiskey and having fun with his band. And he came into our enclosure, and he was lovely, and he kissed me on the lips and said, "You rock!" He grabbed me by the face, and all my band members were like, "How did that happen?" I was like, "I don't know. He loves me." So that was kind of cool hanging with him, because people talk about Lost Boys, but I don't actually like Lost Boys. I know people that get angry with me for that. It's all right. There's other films I like more that he's been in, especially the one where they die and they bring them back. What was that called? I can't think what that was called. With Julia Roberts, and they're all young doctors, and they try to experience death.
Yes.
It'll come to be the minute we stop this, and they remade it, but it's not as good.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Flatliners.
Flatliners.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was an awesome film, and it was shot beautifully. Anyway, so Kiefer Sutherland, that was a fun one. Yoko Ono, meeting Yoko was a thing.
Okay. Where did you meet her?
She curated the Meltdown Festival in London.
Okay.
Which loads of people have done. I think Bowie's did it, and loads of people have done it.
Yeah.
And so she, of course, had a lot, and rightly so, a lot of female artists.
Mm-hmm.
And Siouxsie's tickets for the Friday or the Saturday sold out straight away. So they gave us another one. I think we're the only one that did 2 nights in the end. And then we met her at the end of it was the Sunday. So we must have done Saturday and Sunday, or Friday and Sunday, something like that. And yeah, she came up on the Sunday. So, seeing somebody like that who's been close to a Beatle, especially John, who's probably my favourite, apart from Ringo, of course. But anyway, so yeah, Yoko Ono, that was quite a thing. There have been others, but they're the first 2 that jump out. That's been fun. I mean, Iggy Pop, and of course Gary Newman. I mean, the way they did it was they when the show had been cancelled, Gary came into our enclosure, and he's Aspergic, so he doesn't like talking to a lot of people anyway. So it's his wife that does a lot of it. She's lovely. And they got me out of the Winnebago, and probably an hour after everything had really calmed down. So it was early hours of the morning. And the bass player, Joe, said, "Come on, you've got to come out here." And I was like, yeah. And I was sort of drinking away. He said I had all our stage clothes on. He's like, yeah. And there was a group of people. And I was going, "Oh, Joe, what a trip this is, And anyway, they sort of let go of me, and he pushed me between a person. And I was like, oh. And I turned around, and Gary's about the same height as me. Mind you, I had heels on, but Cuban heels, not those sort of heels. And I turned around, and there's Gary Newman, and he went, "Hello." And I went, "All right." He's like, "Yeah. You're the drummer." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "How you doing?" I said, "Yeah." And then we just started talking. And I said, "Listen, I'm going to get the fan thing out of the way. I'm a massive fan." I said, "I even had the red streak in my hair like you had. And I think there's an album cover with it down there." And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "You saw me with it as well. You saw us at the festival hall. And I was going to come up to you and apologise." I said, "I sort of walked towards you. If this is you, Gary." I said, "I did that." And I did a quick... He said, "Really?" And he was just killing himself laughing. He said, "Well, don't worry." He said, "I ripped it off of someone anyway." He said, "I was going out with a Japanese girl back in 1980-81, and I saw it on like some manga thing or something, liked it, and I just nicked it as well." So I guess Gary Newman too. But there's been other drummer ones too that I've met. There's so many, Dan. It's like so hard. But I'll give you those 2 because they're quite funny stories. The Yoko one, maybe not as funny, but the Kiefer one's quite funny.
The Kiefer, if you'd given me 1,000 guesses, I don't think I would have guessed Kiefer Sutherland. That's great.
I tell you, after this, I'll send you some pictures of us together, and we look like brothers, believe it or not. I know he's a better-looking guy, but we just look like brothers. We got our mouths open, going, in that sort of drunk way when you're having pictures, selfies. I'll have to send it to you.
Amazing, please do.
You can always pop it up here in a minute. It's a funny picture.
Please do. Thank you. I look forward to that. And I guess this is one of the other questions I had prepared, which is kind of on a similar thread.
Okay.
If there was a band or an artist, and this is a completely hypothetical, alive or dead, past or present, that you would have loved to have played with, even if it was like
easy.
Yeah. Okay.
Prince every time.
Okay.
I mean, part of me wants to say Miles Davis, Jimi Hendrix, John Coltrane, But the thing is, I always say to people, Prince, I could jam with Prince and I could play jazz with him. I could play jazz fusion with him. I could play pop with him. I could play some of his singles, his hits with him. I could do blues with him. And because I'm so eclectic in my listening, I've kind of gravitated towards artists that kind of change. I'm a big Bowie fan, but not huge. And I'll probably get some, diss for that. I think he's great. But for me, I needed someone that played more. I mean, I always felt that Dave, as if I know him, Dave. I always felt that David Bowie was brilliant, but he needed someone else to help him to be brilliant, Mike Ronson or Nile Rodgers, to help him. Like Michael Jackson needed Quincy Jones, Whereas for people like Miles Davis and Prince, Bob Dylan, these people didn't need anyone else. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And I know that's being finicky. People say, "Oh, you can't judge it just by that." I go, "Okay." But I'm not knocking those others as artists, and I still have their records. All I'm saying is this is how I see it.
Yeah.
And working with someone like Prince, he could call a Miles Davis or Coltrane tune and rip the ass out of it. And then he could call Chameleon, Herbie Hancock. Then he could call Whole Lot of Love by Led Zeppelin, Come Together by the Beatles. Plus, then he could do one of his own hits. He could do a Joni Mitchell thing. He could do it all. And would often do it all within his 2-hour gigs. He'd give you all the things you want from the new album and singles. But I remember seeing him in '92, and he did a version of Take the A Train with a massive Michael Bland drum solo sort of feature in it, which was amazing. And he would do other Latin tunes and things like that. And to me, that was really exciting. Yeah. If I went to a George Michael gig and Springsteen and Madonna, I'm thinking of all the people in the 80s, Michael Jackson, you'd get a great show and they were brilliant singers and performers. But you wouldn't, for me, I wouldn't have got that depth of music. You're not going to suddenly see, Night in Tunisia was the thing they played. That's it, not Take the A Train, Night in Tunisia by Dizzy Gillespie. But you wouldn't go to a Madonna gig and suddenly hear a rip into like Footprints by Wayne Shorter. As I say, it's not a diss, but this is just how I was wired, going back to my mum and my dad playing this music.
Yeah.
So if he went on and suddenly did Cream or Get Off or Kiss, great, one of his singles. But if he suddenly went into one of these sort of deep dives into his jazz thing, I was equally as happy. Someone next to me might go, "What's this?" And I'd go, "Oh, this is Chameleon by Herbie Hancock," or whatever. But they're like, "Oh, cool." And he would still play it and then rip into something else. And to me, that is the consummate artist. He could sing, he could dance, he could write, he could play the instruments. And not just in the studio, he could rip them live as well. It wasn't like, "Oh, I only do it in the studio." This guy could pick up a bass and do all of it in front of you. It wasn't like, "Oh, yeah, I play all my instruments, but I'm not going to play any live." Yeah.
Yeah.
I know he's not everyone's bag, but hey, I like him for that reason too. He divided people. So every time, 1,000,000,000%, it's Prince. Every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
That's such a compelling answer. I feel like that answer could persuade people to have Prince as their answer as well.
I hope so. Yeah.
My final question is the idea of desert island discs isn't new.
Yes.
We're trying to push this desert island drumming discs.
Okay.
Feel free to interpret that as you will. If these are albums that you want to listen to forever on a desert island because the drumming is just so incredible, but also albums that have influenced your understanding of the drums, your own style, more than any other.
How many?
4.
Oh, can I do like 50? Okay. Oh God. Okay. Tony Williams, the Tony Williams Lifetime Band, with Alan Holdsworth. Believe It. I've got it here somewhere. He's sort of semi-naked on the cover with the sticks. It's a bit of a camp picture. It's a great picture, actually.
Yeah.
That album is amazing. His drumming on that, I remember having it on CD, and I went into FOP in Bath, and I bought it on vinyl, took it home, and just listened. Had it in the car on the CD. I just took it everywhere with me. It was just everything about it. It was like I had Spectrum by Billy Cobham, and that was great. But this, and that stands on its own. It's not comparison.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but there was something more for me, more compelling about Believe It. There was just something about that record and his drumming. And whenever Tony Williams plays that stuff, certainly on that record, I feel like some of it was just peaking. You know, it was like a single take idea. You know, and I know there's some splicing involved in both of those records, actually, quite a bit. But that's not important. But it felt like it was the end of the world if he didn't play that with as much passion uh, as he wanted to put into that track. A few things where he hear sticks click. Does he care? No. Brilliant. You know, just get it down, get it done. This is the take. This is what feels good. And I know one of the CDs has got extra tracks, which has got other takes, and that's okay. I don't mind getting into that world, but in a way, and I know this sounds weird because most fans like all the extra bits, I just want to hear the album. I've got to be honest.
I'm the same. Yeah.
Funny. Other people go, oh, do you know what? I'd sooner hear the alternate take. I listen to them, you know, and I've done that with lots of the Miles albums, you know, that are streaming. And I've listened to the extra bits that are on the box set, but that's about 80 quid. And, you know, that's an expensive hobby. And I've got a few box sets kicking around, don't get me wrong. So it's his playing on that and the material and the band and just how kind of, I don't say quirky, but it just, for where I was at that time, it wasn't square. And I enjoyed the fact it wasn't so square. Yeah. And it felt like it was still jammy, if that's a word. It felt like it was arranged and structured, but in a way that was kind of loose. Yeah. And that appealed to me. And also that 75, 76 period, just before they started, and I get flack for this, but blanding out jazz a little bit. There was no longer any spill in the studio. Everyone were in boot because they'd learned by then. Sure. But the beautiful thing I think about these Impulse records and Blue Note is that they do sound a bit kind of messy. But that spill in the microphones is the glue that makes it work. Yeah. And when they sort of got into this fusion thing, and I know it's louder, so there are other reasons. I do get that. But by the time we get to the Marcus Miller albums in the 90s, again, I've got them. I love them. But everything sounds a bit wine bar-ish and it all changes. Whereas Believe It, for me, is still on that exciting, you know, there's grooves in there. It's like, well, okay, maybe not wine bar music, but it was still exciting. So for me, it had that crossover of great playing. Studio production was better and it just appealed. So I'll say Believe It is one for me. I'd have to say The Roar of 74 by Buddy Rich. You know, I love Buddy's big swing face, Mercy, Mercy, all the classic swing stuff. But I loved it when he played funk and I loved it when he played more rocky, I've got to say, which is kind of what my masterclass is about. You know, it's the other side of Buddy. People want to talk about the feels on big swing face and Norwegian Wood. And that's great. Yeah, why not? Forever we can talk about that. No one ever seemed to talk about his funk stuff. Yeah. And it started quite cheesy, like it would. Someone who didn't really want to take on the Beatles or anybody ended up getting arrangements done of Beatles songs, of Doors songs, and took it forward, you know, and started to play straight and enjoyed playing straight. And as he openly admits, he did suck to start with. I think he even put his fist through the wall when Morris, can't think of his name, studio drummer in New York, was giving him lessons at Manny's to play straight. And Buddy walked out on him twice during the day. You know, and Morris was like, he's going to hit me. And I think he did put his fist through the wall, I think, at one point. Because he'd start, and he'd sort of end up going into this swing thing. Anyway, but he did it really well. And on that album, Roar of 74, he's got Tony Levin on bass from soon to be Peter Gabriel and King Crimson and all that. He's playing great electric bass. The band, the arrangements are kicking. And the swing stuff on there is really happening, but also the straight stuff. There's a track on there called Big Mac, which I don't know if people know, but they should go and check it out. And there's been so many breakbeats been taken from that. And the fill at the start, and anyway, it's just funky as hell. And it's a different side of Buddy that when people say, oh, I don't really like Buddy Rich, you know, go, check this album out. You might like some of it. And they've come back to me and said, I dig some of it. It's really great. So Roar of 74. Do you know that record?
I do. Yeah. No. I was going to say I love. Again, intentional or not, I don't know. You've chosen two drummers that you've done masterclasses for, Under the Influence. So viewers and listeners, if you want to learn more about those drummers and albums, feel free to explore those on our website. Because you talk about Tony Williams and Buddy Rich so well in those two masterclasses, and I remember. So Roar 74 for me was the first Buddy Rich album I listened to, and it gave me a weird perception of him because I thought then, oh, this guy, this is his style. It always has been, right? So I had to work back and be like, oh, okay, no, he was kind of big band jazz, and then he moved on to this. But I was hooked. I think because it was more accessible and funky and groovy, and you describe it in the masterclass as like there are some tracks that are a bit like 80s 70s cop chase, car chase.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in the best way, in the best kind of way.
Totally. Yeah, and I'd forgotten. Yeah, there are two drummers that I had talked about. Yeah, I didn't do that intentionally, by the way, but they're just massive influences. There was something I was going to say about that Buddy thing. I can't think what it was. Oh, yeah. People should check out the track Dancing Men on Live at Ronnie Scott's from 1972, because there's a little breakdown in that section where it's just him, and I think maybe the bass player, and one of the band members got a tambourine and bits and bobs. But the stuff he's doing between the snare, bass drum, and hi-hat, it's kind of predating drum and bass. Some of the stuff he's doing is just phenomenal. I know it's on a different record. But I'm glad you started on Raw of 74. I found that out by accident. I went to a record shop and it was on a double album called Tough Dude. Terrible name. But it was it was awful. And it was a double album, but it was cheap at the time. And I remember running home with it from the Caution Book and Record Shop, putting it on, and the first track was Nutville.
Yeah.
From, you know, so one album was, I found out later, one album was Raw of 74. The second one was Buddy Live at Buddy's Place, which was something else that was released on the same Groove Merchant label. And I didn't like that one as much. That's kind of a small band with Candido on percussion. It's kind of cool. But yeah, Raw of 74. And I remember dropping the needle on Nutville, track one. It was like, dum, dum. But then he's doing this Latin thing. I was like, oh my God. And that was it. I was just away. So I know how you feel when you've discovered it. And a lot of my drum students, I say, listen, I know you know Big Swing Face. You know, it's almost like, almost. Listen to this. Yeah. This is, anyway. So yeah, no, I'm so glad that was your in. So for you, going back the other way, that must have been difficult, going back to more kind of standard stuff when you've heard him really chop out on that stuff.
It was odd. Yeah, because my dad, not to derail your for Desert Island disc. So my dad is a drummer, a big fusion fan, like Weather Report.
Amazing.
I always forget the name.
Lenny White?
No, there's a
Return to Forever.
It was a Weather Report drummer. Kind of later on.
We had Peter Erskine. We had Omar Hakim.
Peter
Erskine.
Yes.
Oh, Erskine is a genius.
Big Peter Erskine fan, and so he threw loads of fusion albums at me, and I think just for so people are aware, my browser decided to update mid Buddy Rich chat, which was very
well, it's fusion chat, wasn't it? You were fusioning out, baby.
It was clearly too much for the browser to handle. Google Chrome had to tap out. But anyway, let's get back on track. You have two Desert Island discs back. We've had Buddy Rich's Raw of 74 and Tony Williams' was it Lifetime or was it?
Yeah, it's Tony Williams' Lifetime Band, I think it's called, but the album's called Believe It.
Believe It.
Gotcha. Yeah, and actually thinking about that, seeing how both of those albums show those drummers in different light, it's quite interesting how I've chosen that, because we know what they do straight, but it was the fact that they were doing something so different on these records that turned me on. That says a lot about how I think about artists and musicians pushing themselves. So I've only just thought of that, actually. Okay, so number 3 would be, and they're in no particular order, number 3 would be, it'd have to be a Gary Newman album, without a doubt. I would say The Pleasure Principle, which had Cars on it, which is one of his biggest hits. Yeah. It's the one where he's sat looking like an android looking at the pyramid. That record, I remember buying that when I was 9. As I say, he was my first poster pin-up, my first rock star crush, if you like. It just blew me away. There was no guitars on that record. He took, apart from a bass, of course, so it was just acoustic drums and synth drums, but not, thankfully, bass, electric bass, and synths. Viola, there's a viola on there, and obviously voice, but no electric guitar. He didn't play any guitar on that album. And I just never heard anything like it. You know, it was just so futuristic. And people say, you know, he was pulling from the Bowie influence. Yes, he was. But I think even Bowie said that he was doing it, that electronic thing, sort of more succinct than even Bowie was doing at the time. You know, that's why Bowie had a bit of a thing against him, because at one point Newman was massive all over the world. He was a real sensation. Again, looking back, it's hard to believe now, but if you go back, you'll see. Of course, my parents hated it, which was brilliant. But I just loved it. And Cedric Sharpley is the drummer on that record. And I never got to meet Cedric, I'm sad to say. But his drumming on grooves like songs like Films and Metal and cars, actually, because cars actually became like a hip hop kind of go-to for in New York. People started to use that, and is it Africa Bambaataa who took it and did something with it? I think is that his name.
I'd have to.
Anyway,
Yeah,
but it became a thing, and this, like Gary says, I'm a pasty white boy from London who ended up being this sort of black music sensation that people were listening to with their ghetto blasters, you know, thinking it was a funk tune. And it's like, I never intended it to be a funk tune. It's about people chasing me in my car, literally, found people that didn't like me. And I'm literally driving on the pavement, trying to get a lock in my door. That's what the song's about, you know, and it ended up being a dance floor classic. So, yeah, so that album, and it was the first time I ever heard the sound, you know, which was a syndrome, I think.
Yeah.
You know, messed with. And it's like, and I remember hearing it and thinking that's cool. And then about 4 years later, I'll start hearing it on on Prince records, but that's another thing. So I would say the pleasure principle. It was his voice. It was the remoteness of the music, talking about himself as a machine and being a part. He wasn't singing about love. He wasn't singing about the stuff that I was hearing with the Beatles and other bands. He was singing about stuff that was just alien, virtually. Dystopian worlds. So that really turned me on, and it was like, oh my god, when I found Blade Runner and his influences and Philip K. Dick, the novelist, I was like, oh my god, I completely see where you're coming from. And Naked Lunch, you know, what's his name? So all that stuff. So that record, and also I'd stare at the cover and think, who is this man? And when he was on TV, he was so like robot-like, no emotion. He was like just staring. It was scary as hell, you know.
Yeah.
And I still go back to that record, and I remember being 9 years old and just, as I say, holding it and smelling it and reading the back of it. Where's Hayes, Middlesex? Where's that? You know, and what's a viola? Yeah. And reading the notes, you know, and these remote lyrics of being this android person. And I'm like, oh. So for me, it would have to be Pleasure Principle. It's hard because Replicas is good, the album before it, and Telecon, but I'll choose that because Cedric's drumming on that is just incredible. Yeah. Nice. And no ride cymbals. He hated ride cymbals, so it's just all crashes and hats. So that was a concept for me. I'd have to say a Prince album. Most people probably think I'm going to go for Sign of the Times, but I'm actually going to go with Parade, which was the soundtrack from a very ill-fated film, Under the Cherry Moon. Now, the reason I picked that is because it's 1986. I'm 16. I've discovered bands like things are changing a little bit. Tears for Fears, all these other bands are coming in. I'm still loving the Beatles and all that business. And I haven't picked a Beatle album, but that's fine. And I remember Ken, who used to be like my older brother. He's not my brother, but I always think of him as a musical older brother. I was working for Sonor Drums, and the warehouse was about a 20-minute drive across Bath from the shop, Assembly Music in Widcombe. Now anyone who knows Bath will remember Assembly Music. So we'd get in our little Toyota van and we'd leave the shop where we'd meet in the morning and go to the warehouse where we'd distribute Sabian cymbals and Sonor drums and Godin guitars as the day is long. And I met loads of great drummers, Chester Thompson, loads of great drummers there. But anyway, and I remember one day you put this cassette in and this track started, and it was Christopher Tracy's Parade, which is track 1 on that album. And it was just the sound of everything on it. And I was like, oh my god, what is this? You know, and then the drums kick in. It's got like a snare with the snare drum with the snare off, but it's got like a with like a gate on it. And it was just like, what is this? And the bass drum clearly wasn't an acoustic bass drum. It was a different bass drum. So I'm thinking, but that's a live hat. So as a 16-year-old, I'm working out on my way to the warehouse thinking, that's a live hat, live snare, but with the snare off. That's electronic kick drum. And it's also got this sound on it. And then when he goes to the toms, they're natural. Anyway, listening to the whole album, it's a brilliant record. And Kiss is on that as well. Obviously a big single. But listening to all the sounds on there and the way that the Linn drum, as I found out, that's what it was called. The Linn drum was worked in with the acoustic drums and his choice of how he used those. And I would hear when he would play certain patterns, he'd come off the hi-hat to play these other syndromes, do do do, and it wasn't do sounds, you know, they were more hip than that. He never did do, thankfully. But and I think so. Then I'll sit there and go into you go boom ka, dum 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 ka, so the clap sound, boom boom boom. And I was like, oh my god, this is a totally different way of playing a groove. Like, how do I do that? So he turned me on to the Linn drum, electronic. How Newman started that with the sound, and of course the sound on the Linn drum is even cooler than the Sin drum, and you can put different effects on it and the way he gated it, or put like a delay on it. On the song Mountains on the album, he hits it once on the and he goes and it claps afterwards. Yeah. But again, you're thinking, how do I play that? And he plays the fill onto the crash, and you've got to come back to it. And Bobby Z was the drummer on some of that, and Sheila E played on some of it as well, and Prince played on it too, most of it. Yeah. Drums. And it's just like, it, as I say, it introduced me to a different way of thinking about the drum kit. Like, how could I do that in live form? So the next thing, I'd buy these terrible electronic drums at the time, cheap as chips, but just trying to work on that. Yeah. So when electronics got better with Roland and SPDSs and all that business, I was really happy, you know. So one, the music is good on there. Two, the songs are great. The production is amazing. The drumming on it is great. And it's an album that also, when you're 16, you're starting to find yourself in the world in many ways. And Prince was, you know, a bit, you know, him and Madonna were kind of the bad black sheep of the family. Yeah. They were enjoying pushing the boundaries of that. And when you're learning and you're living a bit, and, you know, it was like he became a soundtrack. It was like, you know, when I felt a bit kind of like, whoa, put Prince on. Yeah, this is a thing. Going to clubs and people dancing, and he'd be on in the clubs. And it's like, yeah. You know what I'm trying to say. You're 16, you're finding yourself, but again, so that was good because, you know, everyone thought he was quite sexy. It was a bit risque at the time because he was pushing the boundaries of that, which I think he regretted eventually. But anyway. And then the music was good too. So it was the combination of that, and I wasn't getting that so much from Michael Jackson and George Michael. They were great records, but I just didn't have the connection between coming of age and my drumming coming of age and everything. It was just so exciting. So every time I put Parade on, I say to people, listen, it's 86. Be ready for a few kind of fashion things musically, but just listen to what this album sounds like. And it's kind of a combination of like Sly and the Family Stone funk, a bit of Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles, a bit of Joni Mitchell in there, the surrealness of Joni. It's got the hit-making factor of Prince, which he'd already made his own by then, so it's got the Minneapolis thing all over it. Yeah. But it brings together loads of, and there's sort of horns on it. He's not doing the synth horns by then. He's got two horn players, Atlanta Bliss and Eric Leeds playing horns, and Miles Davis was interested in Prince by then as well. So he's got all these different influences. You know, he's appealing to the club land with Kiss, but he's got this other stuff on there like I Wonder You, and a lovely instrumental called Venus de Milo with an orchestra that's just beautiful. Yeah. And the whole album just keeps popping. Like every track is different, a bit like the Beatles used to be. You never, like Revolver, I would have put in my, if I had 5, I would put Revolver by the Beatles, because every track is different. And Prince had that. He didn't want to repeat himself over and over again. Yeah. So that record, just electronic wise and vibe wise, just really turned me on to a different thing. So I'm thankful for all of those. Well, every record there really, but those 4, if you had to, and I'll chuck Revolver in if I could, it's fine. those were the 5 records, or 4 records. Yeah. That is Rob Bryan in a way. There's still other elements of classical, but yeah, of me and my drumming and my music and my production stuff that I do as well. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, really.
That sounds so on brand for you. I think.
Oh right, okay.
But I mean, in a good way. From you know. I haven't known you that long, but I feel like those 4 make a lot of sense for you, Rob Bryan. The drummer I know and the way you play, that in my mind makes a lot of sense.
Oh, cool, good.
And it's kind of made me want to explore certainly the Prince one a little bit more. So I might do that later on.
Yeah. Try and get in that mindset, because it's not Purple Rain, it's not Sign of the Times even, because Sign of the Times is even better in a different way. But there's something about this record that, yeah, I don't know. It's up to you how you find it. One day you might put it on and you might go, ah. Another day you might come on and you go, oh, actually, I get it. Yeah. You know, you might, you know, whatever. I don't want to preach about that. You know, you'll find your way in. But it's a great record. It's a really good record.
I'll you've given it a good case, a good campaign. So I'll revisit it.
Great.
Through technical difficulties, we've spoken for around an hour. And
that's unbelievable. Have we? Oh yeah,
it's flown.
That's amazing.
By.
Yeah.
I think that's a sign of good chat and
I hope so.
Good content. I want to give one, and I know we didn't get to speak about a few things, but perhaps there'll have to be a part two if you're up
Let's
for
do
it.
that next time. Yeah, because I'd love to talk about the solo material and
Absolutely.
also my Jaws mug. No, the 50th anniversary of Jaws. I've got to get this in.
Oh, there you go. There you
it's
go.
the 50th anniversary of one of the greatest films ever made of all time.
Amazing. How could we nearly have finished the pod and not mention that?
Feel free to edit that out.
I'll give one more shout out to all of the incredible content that you've recorded with us. You can find that, viewers and listeners, on our website, drumdog.com. All of the links will be in the descriptions. We've got Ian Pace, we've got Tony Williams is coming up, Buddy Rich, and then a handful of other lessons that Rob has done for us. Very good stuff. And then the big exciting news as well is that UK Drum Show in October.
This is amazing.
Yeah, UK Drum Show, Liverpool, October 19th, I want to say, but
18th, 19th, I think.
19th.
Yeah.
Drum Dog, we have our very own room at the UK Drum Show, and we have 4 incredible professional drummers coming in. Rob is one of them, and I think for now it's a secret as to what you're going to cover, but it's very exciting. And stay tuned, follow all of our socials to get more information on details. You can get tickets, members get early access, so if you're going to UK Drum Show, come swing by the Drum Dog room. People are saying it's the best room in the that sounds very, very Trump. He always says it, doesn't he? People are saying. I don't want to use that format, but swing by the Drum Dog room. It's a great place to be.
You're not going to regret it. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
You're going to go away having fun and learn something. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. You did a much better job of selling it than me, Rob. Thank you. And thanks again, Rob, for your time. It's always a real pleasure speaking with you. I'm going to have fun. Dan. I'm going to go through this and cut it all up, and I can already tell I'm going to have fun doing that. So thank you so much.
Mate, it's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Okay. And I hope you have a good rest of your day and that the session goes well.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
All right, mate.
Thanks, Rob.
Take care, Dan. Cheers, mate. Bye.
Bye-bye.